Tonight we have news for you, breaking news that for whatever reason is being downplayed or ignored by other media outlets, but we think you ought to know about it. 5 simple words describe it. There was no Russian collusion. There's no evidence whatsoever that the Trump campaign conspired in any way with the government of Vladimir Putin during the last presidential election, period. That's apparently the conclusion of the bipartisan Senate Intelligence Committee. That committee spent 2 years investigating this question, of course, hundreds of interviews, reams of classified documents, untold millions in taxpayer dollars. No collusion at all. That is what we are hearing tonight they have found. Now, if you've been following this story at all, and of course you have been, you will not be surprised by this. No Russian collusion is a lot like moon landing actually happened, or abominable snowman was probably a long-haired mountain goat. You knew that already because you're not an idiot. But if so, compare your mental acuity to that of prominent political figures here in Washington. Next time you feel dumb, watch this tape.
I think there's plenty of evidence of collusion or conspiracy in plain sight.
Trump has the Kremlin clan surrounding him. There's more to be learned about it. I believe there's been collusion.
It's starting to smell more and more like collusion.
We saw cold, hard evidence of the Trump campaign, indeed the Trump family, eagerly intending to collude possibly with Russia.
Smells like collusion. Plenty of evidence of collusion. Hard evidence of collusion. In the end, it was all fake. And they knew that. They knew it wasn't real. They were lying from the very first day. Only their remarkable aggression, their willingness to say literally anything, no matter how outrageous or slanderous or vile, kept the rest of us from catching on to what they were doing. If the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee is willing to call someone a traitor to this country, there's got to be some truth to it, right? Actually, no, there wasn't. It was always a hoax. Adam Schiff is an unscrupulous charlatan. That's the real lesson here. Don't expect people like Schiff to apologize, though, or correct the record, much less repair the lives of the people they have destroyed. Carter Page still can't find a job. Roger Stone is still facing life in prison. Meanwhile, Schiff's PR team on the other channel continues like none of this ever happened. Here's Malcolm Nance of MSNBC explaining that the results of a 2-year Senate investigation mean nothing. People are guilty because we say they're guilty. We must punish them.
Let me just say one thing. When Benedict Arnold gave the plans to West Point to Major Andre, and they captured Major Andre, they did not have any real information linking those plans to Benedict Arnold, other than the fact that he was in his presence at one point during that day. But everyone knew it was treason when they caught the man, and they hung him. So at some point, there is going to be a bridge of data here that is going to be unassailable.
No one had any evidence, but everyone knew it was treason when they caught the man and they hung him. That says it all. Let's repeat that once again slowly so you can write down those words and put them on your fridge as a memento of the terrifying mass hysteria we've all just lived through. Quote, everyone knew it was treason when they caught the man and they hung him. That's our country now. That's what the Russia insanity has done to us. The real government shutdown has lasted for nearly 2.5 years. That's 1% of this country's entire existence. We no longer have meaningful policy debates in Washington. We have investigations instead. Nobody can think clearly. Everybody's afraid. The country's core problems don't even rate as interesting anymore, either to legislators or the TV pundits who comment on legislators. The suicide rate just hit a 50-year high. Did you know that? We're in the middle of the worst drug epidemic in the history of America, including the one after the Civil War and the heroin epidemic of the 70s and the crack epidemic of the 80s. This was way worse. And it's one of the reasons the life expectancy in many parts of the country is dropping. This is starting to look like Boris Yeltsin's Russia. And yet nobody in Washington even notices. All Adam Schiff and the rest of the wild-eyed morons can think about is Vladimir Putin, collusion, our hack democracy, and all the other mindless slogans they've repeated long enough to half believe. We've spent 2 years perpetuating a fraud, and they are still doing it. What is this? It's negligence on a stunning scale. It has nothing to do with Trump. It has everything to do with running this country, and they're not. Historians will look back on this moment in amazement and in sadness. Who put these crackpots in charge and let them break things? Why didn't any responsible person in the media say anything about it? Why did they collude in the charade? What the hell happened to America? History will judge us for this moment. Adam Schiff's grandkids will be ashamed of what he did. Also, the House Judiciary Committee, and he joins us tonight. But Julian, in addition to everything I've just been ranting about, and I try not to rant, I'm not a ranter by temperament, but this, I spent the first 3 months trying to take this seriously, okay? And it's not serious, clearly. But we have just completely changed our relationship as a nation with Russia, declared them an enemy, have moved toward war with them on the basis of a story that's fraudulent.
I think that's overstating it, but I am sympathetic to the notion that the problem with our politics is that both sides and the media aligned with both sides tends to get out in front of the facts.
Yeah.
Here. Now, I think collusion is a bad word because collusion is not a legal word. I mean, you and I sitting here, we're colluding for a television show. It doesn't mean anything. The question is conspiracy to violate the criminal laws. There's no question in anybody's mind that the Russians violated criminal laws on election interference. Computer hacks and the illegal foreign expenditures. There's no question that those were criminal violations. The question has always been whether Trump or those around him conspired with the Russians on those two criminal actions. And I've said on this program before, I've said all year, that there's no evidence of that.
But then, so this is what's hard for me. So look, there are always going to be fringes. There are in both parties. You pointed that out, and I agree with you. So I'm one of the few people, I'm not always jumping on Maxine Waters, because I don't think she's a serious person, actually. She's an outlier. I think the chairman of the House Intel Committee is. I think the Speaker of the House is. Those are serious leaders of the Democratic Party, and both of them, you just saw the tape we played, accused the president and those around him, his family, of collusion, a non-crime. How irresponsible is that?
So there's a political Rorschach test that's going on here right now. Both sides see it very differently. And what the Republicans see, and I understand why they see it this way, is what I just said. There's no evidence that Trump or anyone close around him conspired with the Russians to either hack computers or accept illegal foreign expenditures in the election interference in 2016. That's true. On the other hand, the Democratic point of view is, well, there were over 100 contacts with Russians during the campaign. Everyone that's been asked about it has repeatedly lied about those contacts. There were discussions about policy changes to favor the Republicans during the campaign. There was a request from Donald Trump Jr. and others to get dirt on the Clintons. There was a direction from the campaign to find out what the dump was going to be from WikiLeaks. So there's kind of a lot of circumstantial stuff on the other side.
Okay.
And I think
Oswald was in Mexico City before the assassination.
But
does that mean the Mexicans did?
Where we ought to be, if we want to find common ground, is where we ought to be. And I think the Washington Post had a poll on this today. Is that Mueller is, I think, going to do a far more extensive investigation than the House.
Okay, but simple question.
Let's have that report be public.
Okay, that's okay. Whatever. Whatever. At this point,
but it's not whatever. That's the facts.
No,
but those are the facts.
No, this is a prosecutor's allegations. These are not the facts. A prosecutor comes up with a case which is not proven. It is a case, like the kind that I make every night on this show. They're not the facts. It's a position. I'm just wondering if we can have an apology from the Speaker of the House and the Chairman of the House Intel Committee for saying things that were not true and that divided the country and made people afraid and paranoid on the basis of no evidence.
Well, you have to ask them how they want to respond to that. I think they would probably tell you that I'm not certain that the Democrats and Republicans are going to agree on the Senate Intelligence Report. I think there will be a dissenting view on the Senate Intelligence Report for starters. But secondly, I think they will also tell you that Mueller will go far beyond what the Senate Intelligence Committee will find in terms of his investigative ability, his subpoena authority, his ability to go overseas. So I think the Mueller report is going to be a more complete report.
Last question.
And the public, Tucker, wants the report to be public, and we can judge what are facts, what's evidence, what's not.
At this point, 2.5 years in, should Roger Stone spend the rest of his life in prison if we find out there was no Russian collusion? What is the point of all this, of sending Roger Stone for the rest of his life to prison, honestly?
So I think the question on Stone is not just the question of collusion. I think the question is whether he was honest with prosecutors.
Okay.
But Tucker, you railed against the Clintons for obstruction of justice repeatedly because they weren't.
I certainly did.
Because of what you thought they were obfuscating with prosecutors. So you should be consistent here.
I supported Ken Starr's independent counsel investigation, and I'm ashamed that I supported that because it was totally wrong. This independent counsel thing is non-democratic. I should never have supported that.
Well, at least you're trying to be consistent.
Well, I'm trying to be honest. Yeah. Julian, thank you.
Okay.
An activist in Baltimore says she was kicked off the city's Gay Rights Commission for using the wrong pronoun to describe a rapist. Trace Gallagher has more on this story, which we should clarify is real. Trace?
Yeah, hi, Tucker. Julia Beck was offered the chance to join Baltimore Mayor Catherine Pugh's LGBTQ commission. Beck thought it was a prime opportunity for her to voice the concerns of the underrepresented. But as the only lesbian on the commission, Beck claims she immediately felt excluded. She even wrote an article titled "How I Became the Most Hated Lesbian in Baltimore." Beck writes that she committed the unforgivable, saying she believes that even if a male identifies as a female, he's still a male. And she cited the case of convicted rapist Karen White, who is legally a man, admitted to raping several women, and was then sent to a women's prison in the UK, where he proceeded to rape 2 other female inmates. And after all that, it remains unclear if Karen White, who was David Thompson, is actually in the process of transitioning to a woman. But according to Julia Beck, questioning White's gender was the final straw, and she was kicked off the commission, writing, quote, "After a months-long witch hunt, I was found guilty of violence. My crime? Using male pronouns to talk about a convicted male rapist who identifies as transgender and prefers female pronouns. It is far more criminal for me to call a male rapist he than it is for him to rape." We contacted the Baltimore mayor's office. It had no comment. Tucker.
Trace Gallagher, thank you very much for that. Julia Beck joins us now on set. Julia, thanks very much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So you said something that I think many people would in their hearts think is obvious, but very few people are willing to say out loud. You said it knowing you would likely be punished for saying it, but you said it anyway. Why did you do that?
I believe in the truth. I believe that people should have these conversations and say things that matter without fear of punishment.
You are old-fashioned. Why do you think, I couldn't agree with you more, and I'm grateful that you have that attitude, but why do you think it was important to say this specifically?
Well, when we get down to it, women and girls all share a biological reality. We are all female. But if any male person can call himself a woman or legally identify as female, then predatory men will do so in order to gain access to women's single-sex spaces, and this puts every woman and girl at risk.
That's from the beginning. I don't weigh in on this often because sexual politics is a morass, and it's not worth it, to be totally honest with you. But I have enough daughters that I care, and my instinct has always been this change in our society, which we never debated, the terms have never been clarified, is not going to be good for girls in the long run. Do you share that concern?
I definitely do agree. Like I said, this puts every woman and girl at risk of male violence, and this is already happening in many states. In many states, men can legally identify themselves as female and gain access to women's single-sex spaces. And sports is just one institution where men are taking titles, scholarships, and this is a problem.
So it seems like a real problem. Why wouldn't women's groups who exist to carry the banner for women raise the alarm about this?
Women have been speaking out about this for decades, but we have been effectively silenced. Many women, like myself, have been pushed out of spaces that we built, spaces that are intended to include us, simply because we acknowledge biological reality.
Do you think, I mean, you're lesbian, you are in the same acronym as a bunch of other groups, including people who are transgendered. Do you think that makes it more difficult for you to make this argument? I mean, it seems like this has been so politicized that you're expected to have a certain set of views that maybe you don't have.
I see where you're coming from. I would like to make a distinction here. The letters in the acronym share not much. The L, G, and B are based on sexualities. They're based on sex, biological realities.
Yes.
But the T is based on gender identity, which is not based in biological reality. In fact, I would argue that it's opposed to biological reality. The LGB is very different from the T, and I don't think it's fair to lump us all into the same acronym.
Do you find it astounding that it is considered an act of bravery to defend biology?
I wouldn't say so myself, but I guess that's where we are right now, and I hope more women stand up.
Last question, because I can't remember. What did they say to you? You were thrown off this commission. You were punished for saying this out loud. What was the rationale for it?
Frankly, there was no case made. My accuser said that they didn't have to make a case. One of the members of my committee argued that sex was a thing of the past. He said, frankly, science had progressed so far that sex was unimportant. I argued the opposite.
Julia Beck, at a time like this, everyone thinks, I would say what I really think, but most people are afraid to, and you're not. And I'm definitely standing in admiration of that. Thank you for that.
Thank you for having me.
The Green New Deal promises high-speed rail. California just made a big decision about high-speed rail. We'll tell you what it is after the break.
Developing tonight, this from the bipartisan Senate intel investigation into the Trump campaign in Russia that has gone on now for 2 years and has interviewed over 200 people and is apparently winding down.
And I've said it before, we have no factual evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia.
So back when the Republican side of the House Intel Committee produced the same finding, it was met with this reaction from Democrats.
This report was cooked before it was ever baked, and it is a truly desperate attempt, I think, by the majority.
This incomplete, inaccurate report only invites hacking.
This is no way to run an investigation. It is only a way to go through the motions to give the pretense of trying to find the truth.
All right, so now we wait for the third leg of this investigation from special counsel Robert Mueller. Fox News chief intelligence correspondent Catherine Herridge reports tonight from Capitol Hill with where this stands now. Hi, Catherine.
Well, thank you, Martha. The Republican chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee and the ranking Democrat both say publicly that they have more questions and they want to talk to more witnesses, but all signs indicate that the investigation is winding down. No one is talking about hard evidence of collusion, though Democrats say they continue to be concerned about what they characterize as suspicious contacts between Russians and the Trump campaign. And also tonight, there may be new legal exposure for the president's former personal attorney, Michael Cohen. After his lawyer, Lanny Davis, issued this statement, the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence has accepted Mr. Cohen's request for postponement of tomorrow, that's Tuesday's hearing, due to post-surgery medical needs. A future date will be announced by the committee. The issue is that Cohen, who was last on the Hill 2 years ago, according to Senator Burr, was seen publicly over the weekend and also Monday night, indicating that maybe he wasn't that sick after all. Here's Senator Burr speaking late today to reporters.
I can assure you that any goodwill that might have existed in the committee with Michael Cohen is now gone. The way he's positioning himself, not coming to the committee, we may hope him go to prison.
And in the last few minutes, Martha, we have received an updated statement from Lanny Davis addressing Senator Burr's criticism. It says that Mr. Cohen does have post-surgery shoulder pain and that Senator Burr, and this is a little bit cheeky, this response, should understand that it's still possible to be in pain and have a dinner out at the restaurant with his wife and his children. But the bottom line is that there was a subpoena for Michael Cohen to appear before the Senate Intelligence Committee today, and he did not appear, and the timeline is now very short for him to do so because he begins his prison term in early March. Martha.
Catherine, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Joining me now, Sean Spicer, former White House press secretary and senior advisor for America First Action, and Juan Williams, Fox News political analyst and co-host of The Five. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here this evening. Juan, let me just get your reaction, first of all. You know, you saw the response when the Republican side House Intel report came out, and now you have Chairman Burr saying that he doesn't see anything in terms of the most important elements they were looking for here.
Well, in the case of the House committee, Devin Nunes, the congressman from California, was the leader there, and there was lots of suspicion that, in fact, he was coordinating not only the investigation, but statements that were with the White House, with the Trump White House. And I think that's why, Martha, you saw that group of people, the Democrats, saying they did not have confidence in the findings. I think it's very different with the report coming from the Senate. I think that what we've seen from Richard Burr of North Carolina, Mark Warner of Virginia, is an investigation that has a high level of credibility. And when they say they can't find any evidence of collusion, I think it carries a great deal of weight. I would make one point to you very quickly that I think say that there's no collusion doesn't mean there's no conspiracy. I think we know that from intelligence officials and others that there were efforts by the Russians to interfere in our election and to help Donald Trump.
Sean, what do you think?
I almost entirely agreed with Juan until the very end. But look, this thing's been going on for 2 years. As you mentioned, 200 witnesses, 300,000 documents were produced. And this was the statement of Chairman Richard Burr. Quote, if we write a report based upon the facts that we have, then we don't have anything that would suggest that there was collusion by the Trump campaign in Russia, full stop. That's the bipartisan conclusion of that committee. And I agree with Juan. It was done in a bipartisan fashion. Yeah, it carries a lot of credibility. And I think at some point, but I think at some point that look, the reality is that Democrats have been in search of a reason why they lost this election. The bottom line is they ran a poor campaign. Hillary ran a poor campaign. Donald Trump spoke to so many forgotten Americans, and we ran a campaign that most people didn't give us the respect that we deserve. The bottom line is we won, they lost, and the collusion that they've been searching for to make up the excuse as to why they lost doesn't exist.
Well, as I said in the beginning, we wait for Robert Mueller's report, and we will see what is in there. And even Senator Burr left the caveat that there could be, something else that comes up along the way. But as you point out, Sean, they've been at this a long time. They've been looking, under every rock they can find for 2 years. And I thought this was an interesting comment by the president's former attorney, John Dowd, who said, I would be shocked if there is a report or anything other than we're done from Robert Mueller. Would that shock you, Juan?
Well, no, I expect a report, but I got to say, I'm on the outside of this. I know that Mueller, as a prosecutor, has no obligation to provide a report. Essentially, when he indicts people, and he's indicted, I think there's 33 plus, including that large group of Russians, but also when he indicts, that's his basic report to the people. Here is what I know, and here is who I'm going after. I must quickly say, in response to what Sean was saying, I think there are lots of Republicans who, even if there was a proof of coordination and conspiracy, say we shouldn't impeach this president. But if there's obstruction, it's only like a third of Republicans who say
put the
that
poll
could
up
be a basis.
that Juan is referring to, just so everybody has it. This is the Washington Post poll. If the Mueller report concludes that Trump tried to interfere with the probe in a way that amounts to obstruction of justice, would you support an effort to impeach Trump? And 60% in this Washington Post poll
of
say
Republican
no.
voters.
Yes,
well,
correct.
Then fine. But again, we keep trying to find an if-then. So if there's no collusion, then if he did this and if he did this. The bottom line is, so far, 2 out of the 3 entities looking into this say there's no collusion. My guess is that we go 3 for 3. But we're losing sight of the bigger fact, and this is something else that Mueller has a charge with, which is making sure that any entity, foreign or domestic, that tried to interfere with our election is brought to justice. He's already indicted over 20 individuals who did that, and we need to make sure that we don't lose focus. There was no collusion, but we need to take steps to make sure that every entity that tries to interfere with our election understands that they will be caught and brought to justice. And that is similar. That is also part of Mueller's charge.
Well, I mean, that was the original. That was the original mandate. The problem is that it has bled far beyond that. And we also know that there are investigations going on in New York. They're investigating the family, the finances, every single thing that they can get their hands on. I thought this was interesting, though. John Dowd did an interview with The Investigation, a podcast for ABC Radio, and he was asked, and this was one of the reasons, why there was a bit of disagreement on the legal team about whether or not the president should answer questions verbally or should sit down. And here's what John Dowd said. I wanted to get your thoughts on this, Sean, and then Juan.
He couldn't do it. There's no way he could. I mean, we'd have to script it. In my questioning him or talking to him, first question easy, second question easy, third question he wasn't sure. And he doesn't like being unsure. So he'll guess. There's your trap right there.
Does that make sense to you? Does that add up to you with the president that you worked for, Sean?
I don't think it's just the president. I think with any witness, I mean, if you're not 100% sure of an answer, that's where they start to entrap you. The way that if you don't answer it in a way that's exactly how you're supposed to, then they go down a rabbit hole and they start saying, well, if you didn't know that, did you know this and did you know that? I think it's sage advice that he was given, because once you start going down one hole, and the bottom line is, and Juan touched on this a little bit with his answer, which is once there was no collusion, then was there a conspiracy? Was there this? Right. Did you not pay this? Did you not do this? I think that what we've got to remember is that when the Democrats find out that there was no collusion, They're not going to admit that they were wrong. They're going to pivot to the next thing. And that's the reality. Look for that. Because once they strike out and go 3 out of 3, that there was no collusion, either the House, the Senate, or Mueller, they're going to move on to something else. But they won't admit that they were wrong on the first charge. They're going to find the next one and the next one and the next one until they can find something that sticks in their opinion.
I got to leave there. Thank you, gentlemen. Great to see you both tonight. Thank you very much.